Hey, just thought I'd do a quick status update, let people know where things are if they're interested with this Z80 board. So, for reference, this was the original board design. These were manufactured by PCBWay, and this was, my first version. Essentially the same as what I ended up with, except there were a few typos in here. There was a missing wire on address line 4, which is a bit of a problem, and a few other issues. So, but this was also the order that got delayed for like 3 weeks by DHL. I think it ended up just sitting on a truck because I got a hold of somebody and they managed to have it delivered within about 2 hours on a truck that was already out. So, but anyway, before these showed up, I had already made some engineering changes and designed this board and ordered that one through JLC PCB. So this showed up, exactly the same time as this one, but had some corrections. So this was the board that I put components on and built up into that first prototype that you can see in some of the videos, and it worked really well. So there were a few minor issues, but nothing I couldn't fix by running a few jumper wires and such. But I wanted to make a second version of this with two additions. So I wanted to add a wireless option for communication in addition to the wired USB, and I also wanted to farm out some of the address lines and bus signals. So this is the current version. Now this board amazingly showed up in about 2 days. It left Hong Kong, and 2 days later it was at my door, which was, amazingly fast delivery. It actually got here faster than my DHL order, which I'm still waiting for because they're having some kind of delay. So I'm expecting my last set of parts to come in the next couple of days. But this, will take an ESP01, an 8266 board right here, and then I have, of course, all of the address data and control signals available here on the side so that you can actually hook this up to some external devices. There's an additional Wi-Fi switch here which supplies or cuts the main power to the ASP, because that can be a money-hungry device. And then, the backplane is more or less the same as what it was, except that to get in all the extra wiring for this and the ESP, I needed to move some things around. And I moved the Z80 and the SRAM up to the front, which seems kind of fitting somehow. I mean, you those are the stars of the show, right? So putting them on the very front seems like a reasonable placement for them. So I've started building this up last night, and this is my version of macrame. I can put these down with solder paste and hot air them, but I actually enjoy hand soldering, and I'm actually starting to get halfway decent with drag soldering, and so that's fun to do. So I built up this little 5-volt boost section because that's the piece that smoked on my original build way back when. And I've been having trouble with 5-volt boosts. I actually bought a pre-built breakout board from Adafruit for LiPo to 5 volts, and had some issues with that too. In addition to the high-pitched whine it would sometimes make, it would give me a nice solid 5 volts on a voltmeter, but once I put it under load, it just dropped down to 3-something volts, and that seemed to be a familiar experience for other people in the forums and such. So I built this up on actually on one of the old, original boards, and that seemed to work. So I built it up on here again, and sure enough, seems to give me a nice solid usable 5 volts coming out. So this whole board will be 5 volts, which means I can use blue LEDs, because those normally need about 4 volts to drive. And I can drive the ESP board with my 3.3 volt regulator, of course. I can run the AT Mega at 16 megahertz instead of 12, because 3.3 volts, it only is certified up to 12 megahertz. And I can run the Z80 up as far as the die will allow, and I've got some 10 megahertz Z80, so I might crank those up. Those are technically spec'd at 5 volts only, but I've been running them at 3.9, 3.8 from my LiPo, and they seem to be working fine. But probably a little more comfort, getting a good solid 5 volts in there. So so that's the plan right now, and I just soldered up a few of these chips this morning, just some of the packages. My flash memory, I still do not have the right footprint. So on the original one, the spacing for the legs of this was way too small for the actual chip. So I widened it. I put in the actual package name to, I think, Ultra Librarian, and pulled down a footprint with nice wide pads on it, and it's still not wide enough. The legs of this chip are just really far removed from the body, and they make contact with the board, basically right at the edge of the solder pad. So I bent those in and soldered them down, and we'll see if that works. But anyway, this is the current status, and I'll be building it up over the next week or so. No classes this week, so this is exam week. I'll be grading all afternoon and tonight, and if I get some good moments where I want to take a break, I'll go back and solder more of these parts on. Soldering the chips is very fast, and then soldering all of these individual capacitors, resistors, that'll take a while. And then, of course, there's the front with 40-some LEDs to solder. And I tried, using solder paste on these originally, and actually got into a lot of trouble with bridging to some of these vias. There's vias all over the place, and that was causing a lot of issues. So I ended up hand soldering the first one, and that seemed to work well. But all of these little through-hole connections seem to just invite solder paste to glom onto them. And some of them are okay because they're actually connected to the adjacent pad, but some of them were causing issues. So I'll be soldering these up by hand. I'll socket the ESP because I'm still going to play around with the programming of that board's processor. But anyway, that's the basic plan. I'm not going to populate these for now, but we'll eventually, possibly put in some headers there so I can pull wires off of them. And that's pretty much it. So that's where things stand right now, and I will post updates as they occur.